You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie from Massachusetts, home of chowder, revolutionary history, and the ever-present casual threat of turkey attacks on suburban streets.
And I'm Johanna from Austria. Famous, well, not I'm famous, Austria is famous for classical music, chocolate cake, and probably giving the world the most terrifying Christmas traditions, I'd say. And you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two women who've never met in real life, but still manage to finish each other's morbid
Sandwiches. Sentences.
See, it's like we share a brain.
Okay, before we get started, we'd like to take a moment for a huge, sincere thank you to our newest Patreon supporters. They are Anna T., thank you. Jared K. Barton, thank you very much, Jared. And Tammy Smith, thank you, all of you, so much. We really appreciate you. You're amazing.
Seriously, your support means the world to us. It's listeners like you who make this podcast even possible.
That's right. So today, we have had some heavy hitter episodes lately. Lots of death, lots of missing children. So you know what that means. We've got a palate cleanser episode for you today. Something a little lighter, just to kind of shake off some of that gloom and doom of previous cases.
Yeah, grab your safety blanket, stock up on anti-apocalypse umbrellas, and relax as we talk about some of the most ridiculous, harmless, and delightfully wrong doomsday predictions.
Yeah. We're not even getting into Nostradamus today, so
no,
that's a whole thing for another day. Okay, let's dive into the funniest ways the world absolutely did not end. And I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that lately it feels like every time you turn on the news, someone somewhere is casually mentioning how we're inching closer to doomsday. Climate crisis, pandemics, global conflict. Honestly, at this point, we're basically living through a very depressing bingo card.
Right? And It's easy to think we're uniquely unlucky, that this must be the first time humanity has ever felt like the world was about to implode. Of course, if you listen to us regularly, you already know that mankind has always been kind of, well, fucked. All through history, this isn't the first time we're collectively panicking, and it definitely won't be the last.
Exactly. We know things out there are feeling pretty tense these days, and we get it. It's exhausting. And while we should absolutely take the world seriously, we just need a good chuckle every now and then to lighten things up.
And that's what we're here for. We're not just here to make you scared of the dark, we're also here to cheer you up at least a little bit. So today, let's take a break from the doom scrolling and remind ourselves just how often humanity has gotten it spectacularly and sometimes hilariously wrong when it comes to predicting the end of the world. What should we start with? How about the Stöffler flood for our first doomsday that never happened? Because believe it or not, back in 1524, Europe was fully convinced it was about to be washed off the map. The panic started thanks to a guy named Johannes Stöffler, who was born in 1452 in a little village called Justingen, which is now part of Schelklingen in the Swabian Alp. That's southern Germany. Johannes got his early education at a monastery school because that's how you did school back then mostly, and in 1472 he enrolled at the brand new University of Ingolstadt. By the way, I used to live and work there for 2 months, one summer, working at the Audi plant.
Did I know that you worked for an Audi plant?
Yeah, I told you.
I forgot.
Not one, D. the hub.
Oh, that's cool.
Anyway, Johannes earned a baccalaureus in 1473 and a master's, or I don't know what's the Latin equivalent to that, in 1476, which means he was probably brilliant or the bar was kind of flexible.
Yeah, I'm sure he was brilliant.
After finishing his studies, he returned to his hometown and became the local parish priest. But he didn't stop at sermons and sacraments. In his spare time, because apparently he did have spare time, he threw himself into the study of astronomy and astrology. He started crafting clocks and globes and all sort of fancy astronomical instruments.
Yeah, he sounds like the sort of overachiever you'd avoid at dinner parties.
Yeah, not only that, he was also a bit of a downer because in 1499 he predicted that on 20th of February, 1524, a rare alignment of the planets in the zodiac sign of Pisces would lead to a massive flood. Pisces season starts on 19th of February and runs through 20th of March. So when those planets starting aligning in February 1524, astrologers saw that happening in Pisces and naturally went, yep, definitely a flood. We're doomed.
Doomed.
And as a Pisces, I'd just like to say, yes, we are a water sign. Yes, a lot of serial killers are apparently Pisces. And no, I don't want to talk about it. But I think if we as Pisces end the world, it will be one moody, sad murder at a time, not a flood. That's way too aggressive for us, I think.
Like a Pisces purge. Pisces, Paul is a Pisces too. I wonder if Taurus and Pisces are known to be compatible.
I always hear that Pisces and Scorpios are the perfect match, I think. But I honestly never met a Scorpio man I liked, so I don't know. I can't vouch for that.
I did. But
yeah?
Scorpio men in my life were always trouble.
I think they're trouble, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, keep in mind this Johannes Stöffler, that wasn't some weird guy shouting, standing on a soapbox. He was a well-respected academic, and back then, astrology wasn't fringe. It was part of how people made sense of the universe. And he was publishing, almanacs and charts, and when he said something big was coming, people actually listened. At first, though, his predictions were pretty vague. It was more like, big changes ahead, and less build an ark immediately. But of course, the big changes ahead wasn't dramatic enough. Nobody was really worried at that time. But pretty soon, more and more astrologers would join in and they would take Stöffler's slightly ominous warning and cranked it to 11. Some Italian astrologers basically turned it into an astrological horror movie, complete with full-scale floods, apocalyptic storms, and cities wiped off the map. And this was right around the time printing presses were becoming a thing, so you better believe this flood panic spread like wildfire. By the early 1520s, people across Europe were convinced the flood was coming. I think it was expected to start in London and then kind of swallow most of Central Europe.
Across the sea. For some reason, that's funny to me. Like, it's going to start in England. And then once it's just gone, covered by the North Sea, then it'll come get us. I'm not judging. I'm just intrigued.
By that point, the prophecy's been circulating for decades. And, the date is getting closer and closer. And people are not just nervously glancing at the sky. They are packing up their lives, abandoning their homes and heading for higher ground. Some started building literal arks. Others made plans to flee inland, and it was mostly wealthier folks, and they set up camp on nearby hills. Apparently, one nervous prior even built a fortified estate stocked with boats, food, and presumably some very judgmental monks. I have to say, though, there's a lot of lore around this kind of flood prophecy. Not everything you read about. It's more, the ark building that happened and the boat building, but also there were some exaggerations over the last centuries when it came to these stories. You know what I mean?
Of course, they're always exaggerated. Yeah. Oh, can you imagine being trapped on an ark with a bunch of judgmental monks? I'll take the animals, thanks. So it's amazing that people were actually building arks.
That's correct. And we're not talking like a few rafts here and there. There was like a whole boat mania. Boat builders suddenly became like the most wanted tradesmen in town. Merchants started selling flood survival kits, basically food and, I guess, alcohol in flasks. Riverbanks were lined with these hastily constructed vessels, many of which looked like a little ambitious, let's say, and some were more like leaky sheds on barrels than seaworthy ships. And then, February 24th, 1524 rolled around.
Bum, bum, bum.
In London, people stood by the Thames River, holding their breath. Some stayed up all night watching for the rising waters. But the river did what rivers do. It came in, it went out. It didn't even bother to look ominous. No flood. Not even a dramatic drizzle. Not even an astronomically high tide. It was just normal.
Ugh, the worst.
Meanwhile, in cities like Venice, similar scenes played out on a smaller scale. I read of gondolieri being hired out at ridiculous prices. Town folks were building makeshift rafts out of wine barrels, furniture, and I kid you not, apparently a tub-shaped floating device.
Imagine just clinging to your clawfoot tub while floating down the street, muttering, this is fine. This is fine. Everything's fine.
Everything is fine.
It's fine.
You want to hear the most ironic part?
Yes.
1524 turned out to be one of the driest years around the time. There are historical climate records and analysis from, I think it's called dendrochronology, so the tree ring studies, and also written accounts. And it's confirmed. 1524 was not only flood-free, it was one of the less rainy years of the period. No floods, no storm, just dry rivers and a trail of regret. People were glad, but also kind of pissed because they had been panicking for decades over nothing. Some even suggested tossing the astrologers into the river to make up for the disappointment. The astrologers' response, though, the stars were right, of course. There had just been a teeny tiny error, a miscalculation. The flood wasn't in 1524. Johanna Stöffler said, oops, sorry, I meant to say 1528, of course. A spoiler alert, that one didn't come true either. Other astrologers even claimed that it was actually due in 1624, and I think that's convenient because nobody would have been alive then from the people from the original panic.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, thousands of terrified Europeans invested in apocalypse boats, and the world carried on just as it always had, completely oblivious to our plans and lives and worries and panic.
Don't forget the panic. So let's fast forward about 140 years from the soggy non-apocalypse of 1524 to a much more literal sort of hellfire, London, 1666. Now,
Love it.
If you're into ominous numbers and biblical symbolism, this one practically writes itself. The Great Fire of London kicked off on September 2nd, 1666. Yes, 666. And sure, we might joke about 666 every now and then as being the number of the beast or the thing that shows up on your receipt when you're having a really cursed day. But back then, people were deadly serious about it. That number in the actual year had people spiraling. And keep in mind, this is just 1 year after the Great Plague of 1665, which killed nearly a quarter of the city's population. At that point, people were like, okay, rats, then fire. Now the world is ending. That's fine. This seems fair. Kind of reminds me of the Halifax explosion episode, where it's like, great, there was an explosion.
Yeah.
Then a tsunami. And then fire, and then a blizzard. Like, this is fine.
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a mess. The fire in London started on Pudding Lane, which, yes, sounds adorable and deeply non-threatening. Also, I now want dessert. Ironically, it was a bakery where the fire broke out in the early morning hours of September 2nd. By the time it was done, 4 days later, it had destroyed over 13,000 homes, 87 churches, including St. Paul's Cathedral, countless businesses, bridges, and warehouses, and basically the entire medieval city center. It was one of the most devastating urban fires in recorded history. And while the flames were spreading, so was the belief that this was it. It was the end, the apocalypse. Everybody panic. Why? Because of a group called the Fifth Monarchists. Now, if you're thinking, hey, that sounds like a cult, you're not entirely wrong. These were radical Christians who believed that the world was about to be overthrown and replaced with the literal kingdom of Jesus Christ. They thought there had been 4 great empires, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, and the 5th kingdom, the final one, would be ruled by Jesus himself. In person, from London, any day now, live. They were fired up, no pun intended, after one of their members, Thomas Venner, led a failed uprising in 1661 trying to overthrow the government in order to help Christ get a head start.
Because he needs the help. He needs.
I was going to say, come on. I feel like Christ can handle this. And it didn't go well for him. Venner was executed, but the movement lingered. And by 1666, that number alone had them on full Messiah watch. So, when the city started burning, it wasn't just a disaster, it was confirmation the world was ending. The heavens were angry, London was Babylon, plague, fire, 666, come on, what else do we need, really?
I mean, it makes sense.
It does.
I'd be like, something's kind of going on here.
Mm-hmm. So, people fled the city in droves. Others stayed behind to panic more locally. They were like, don't flee to panic. Panic locally. Support your local hardware store. Drink at your local bar. Come on, people. There were conspiracy theories as always. Some people blamed foreigners. Others blamed Catholics. And one poor French watchmaker named Robert Hubert, or Hubert, probably right?
Yeah.
If he was French.
Robert Hubert. Which is a beautiful name.
Robert Hubert.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of throat work in that name. Not mad about it. So, Hubert confessed to starting the fire. This is terrible. Even though he hadn't arrived in London when it began. And this is what the British Library has to say about that incident. Quote, Hubert claimed to have created a crude fire grenade by placing gunpowder, brimstone, and other flammable material onto the end of a pole and pushing it through the open window of the bakery on Pudding Lane. The only supporting evidence for Hubert's confession lay in his ability to go to the site of the bakery and to describe its appearance. His claim that he pushed a fireball through a window was entirely falsified, as even the owner of the bakery maintained that it had no windows.
What is a fireball? That sounds like some anime thing.
It sounds like, right, I'm immediately imagining, and I don't know why, but it's David Bowie as the Goblin King.
No, he had glass bolts, didn't he?
He did. And I don't know why. But yes, we're imagining like a conjuring a fireball when what he's talking about was, a crude fire grenade, brimstone.
Like a Molotov
What is
cocktail?
brimstone? Is brimstone? No, not a Molotov cocktail because that involves throwing. He basically created like a torch, like a really hot torch on the end of a pole. And then he said he like pushed the bowl through an open window. It's really weird. Like, I'm imagining like what glass blowers use with like a hot, but obviously he wasn't blowing real glass. The whole idea of it is just bizarre. And then the fact that they're like, oh, no, that couldn't have been him. We don't have any windows in this building. Okay, let me finish this article because it's bad. Later, the testimony of the captain of the ship on which Hubert sailed from Sweden would further prove his innocence by confirming that Hubert had not arrived in England until 2 days after the fire started, end quote. So that is wild because it just makes one think kind of hard, doesn't it, about all the things people have confessed to over the years, probably been killed for over the years, doesn't it? Like, how many times did this happen? Because even though they were able to prove absolutely conclusively that he had nothing to do with starting the fire and could not have because he was at sea when it happened, that did not stop them from executing him.
Bummer.
Because you need a scapegoat. And when it comes to doomsday hysteria, facts are rarely invited to the party. Then there's Samuel, is it Pepys? Pepys. He's everyone's favorite 17th century diary oversharer. It's better to overshare in your diary. I'm a panicky oversharer, which I now know is ADHD, but yeah, it sucks. So anyway, when the fire reached Samuel's neighborhood, he did what any sensible man would do. He got out a shovel and he went out to the garden and he started digging a hole. And once he got that hole nice and deep, he went back into the house and he returned with a bag. And inside the bag was some cheese and wine, which he buried in the backyard because his priorities were in order.
I mean, we have to be, truth be told, a big wheel of Parmesan cheese is expensive today, and it was 100%. Very valuable back then. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any Parmesan, if you have any jamon iberico going on, you're going to hide that food. Nom, 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 nom. Okay. Now I really, really want both Parmesan and jamon iberico. It's fine. Some people thought that the fire was divine punishment. Others blamed the king or the pope or weirdly, comets. A few people really did think the Antichrist had arrived and that Jesus was about to descend through the smoke and ash to take the throne. Spoiler alert, he did not. And here's the twist. While the fire was catastrophic, it also had one unexpected benefit. I like a silver lining, right? It helped wipe out the last traces of the plague, burned out the rats and the fleas and all of that cramped, unhygienic housing and straw that they thrived in. So in the long run, the fire may have saved lives. Just, after it leveled the entire city first. And rather than leaving you with some good news, let me also say that while there were less than 10 human lives lost to the fire itself, it is unknown how many hundreds or thousands died in the aftermath due to exposure, poverty, all kinds of problems, but not plague. They had 99 problems, but plague was not one. So huzzah for that. And no, 1666 was not the end of the world, but it felt like it to the people living through it. It's funny to me because I've always really liked the numbers 13 and 666 because I like an underdog and no one else loves those numbers. I'm not even kidding.
Did you have this as a kid when we learned numbers? I always had this I imagined the numbers 1 through 9 to be like, to have kind of relationships with each other, like some were siblings and others were just friends, like 7 and 3 were friends, and I don't know why, I can't even explain it.
Oh, that's like a kind of synesthesia, do you think? Oh, that's interesting. I kind of understand what you mean.
I can't even explain it better.
That sounds like a type of synesthesia to me.
What's that?
Synesthesia, I think, if I'm telling you the completely wrong thing, wouldn't that be great? Someone will let us know. I believe it's that thing where you can hear color or see music notes.
Yeah, okay.
It sounds like you can feel an affinity of relationship between numbers. Is it based on the way they look?
I don't
down?
even know. Probably because I also thought that 9 and 7 are siblings.
Well, they're both odd. I understand 9 and 7, but also I feel like, are 6 and 9?
I don't even remember, honestly. I just remember
right.
these couple of numbers. But I had this whole very...
You had a system for it. I love that. All right.
So now that we survived the fires of 1666, let's fast forward to something a bit more celestial. We are specifically talking now about Halley's Comet or Halley's Comet and the public meltdown it caused in 1910. It's named after Edmund Halley, the British astronomer, who in 1705 realized that several bright comets people had seen over the centuries. Like he kind of read several accounts and he had the conclusion that they were all the same comet making repeat appearances. And so he was able to predict it would return in 1758 and boom, it did. Big moment for science.
But I think people also say Halley's Comet and they mean Halley's Comet. I'm starting to feel...
It's going to become this whole archipelago
thing. I think I'm right that it's Halley's Comet.
Halley's, yeah. Halley's.
But I think a lot of Americans, myself included in the past, have said Halley's Comet, and they mean Halley's Comet.
So anyway, Halley's Comet, or IP/Halley, if you're being formal, swings by Earth about every 76 or so years, just often enough to absolutely terrify a whole new generation of people. Long before 1758, when Edmund Halley predicted that the comet would return to Earth, Halley's Comet was already kind of infamous. The earliest recorded sighting dates back to 240 BCE in Chinese chronicles.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
What I find also fascinating that it showed up in 1066, right before the Battle of Hastings, and it was literally stitched into the Bayeux tapestry as a bad omen. How do you pronounce Bayeux?
Same way you just did.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Imagine being so ominous that they embroider you into history. I actually really wanted to see the Bayeux tapestry, and we got pretty close on a family trip to Normandy, but my dad and I got outvoted. So
what?
It was fine. I know. There was a big group of us, so we all had to sort of pick and choose our most important things that we wanted to see and do, and the Bayeux tapestry didn't cut it for everyone in our group. It's okay.
So then in 1456, it was such a source of anxiety that the Pope allegedly ordered special prayers to protect Earth from the evil comet, which, to be honest, feels like overkill for a giant dirty snowball in space traveling around. And yeah, it's literally a dirty snowball. I mean, that's oversimplification again, but that's what a comet is at its core. Ice, rock, dust, frozen gas.
Yeah.
And when the comet swings by, the sun heats up and gas and dust shoot off and voila, giant glowing tail. Looks amazing, completely harmless, and people are still determined to panic about it every single time. The last time it showed up was 1986, which was a bit of a letdown, visibility-wise, but it was the first time we got actual photos of a comet nucleus.
I remember all the buzz around the 1986 appearance. Do you remember? I would have been 9.
I was 7, and I remember that it was kind of talked about, but I really was not interested in any of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I was, but now I can't remember. I'll have to ask my dad or Lara.
Natural science was never my forte.
Yeah, I liked that better than maths.
In 2061, it will come back, and depending on how the next few decades go, we'll either be marveling at it from our backyards or we're going to be hiding in basements with bottled air again. It could go either way, I have a feeling.
Who can say?
So it was also bound to show up in 1910. And that time, astronomers announced that not only would it be visible to the naked eye, but that Earth would pass directly through its tail. And everyone momentarily lost their fucking mind. Especially after a French astronomer named Camille Flammarion suggested that the comet's tail contained cyanogen gas and might, quote, impregnate the atmosphere and possibly snuff out all life on Earth, end quote. And that's a real quote, by the way. Flammarion basically said, oh, it's probably fine, but maybe not. Could be the apocalypse. Hard to say.
I mean, it's one of those two things. It's either nothing or we're all going to die.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Cue planet-wide hysteria. Even though other astronomers were like, no, it's fine. It's trace amounts of gas. Nothing's going to happen. You can imagine which version of the story people ran with. The less boring one. It's always the less boring one.
These papers aren't going to sell themselves.
Exactly. It didn't help that 1910 was already a tense transitional year. You had the tail end of the Edwardian era, spiritualism still in full swing, people caught between science and sciences. Newspapers were exploding in popularity, and editors realized very quickly that comet may kill everyone, extra, read all about it, sells a lot more copies than astronomers advise, chill.
Just keep your cool and hope for the best.
In the US and France especially, people were stocking up on comet survival gear. Enter one of the most iconic products of this panic, the anti-comet peel.
This is amazing.
These were often just baking soda, sugar, or some random tonic in a bottle sold with labels like protects against comet vapors. Because of course it does, and you need to buy it. One company even marketed a comet elixir that would, quote, fortify the lungs against atmospheric disturbances, end quote.
I like the pills, the picture. I think we can share in our socials, but
yeah,
it's
there are several. Yeah, you have like a couple, an older woman and a guy, and they're hiding behind an umbrella. I think they also sold umbrellas. I'm not sure.
They might have, but it says Hope's anti-comet pills, an elixir for escaping. Now, my vision isn't great the last few days because of my head.
The wrath of the heavens.
I thought it said the wrath of the beavers for a really long time and was trying to figure out what beavers had to do with comets. The wrath of the beavers. Get your umbrellas. They're coming. They want your trees. That was weird. Yeah, this is great. 25 cents each. I feel like 25 cents in 1910 was not nothing.
Is it each pill or each bottle?
I don't know.
I'm curious if this was a real ad or somebody just kind of made an ad after hearing
Faked
that.
it?
Yeah. Because I read several accounts of this in the newspaper and I saw people holding bottles, but that was the only ad I saw.
Interesting.
Anyway, people also started buying gas masks, sealing windows with wet towels, and in some cases, and I'm not making this up, they tried to dig underground bunkers to ride it out, which feels a bit labor-intensive and overcommitted in a way.
Just a little bit.
There's also, I read quite a few newspaper articles from 1910, and I have to say, there's a lot of racism going on.
Oh, no. No, really?
No, obviously, but also when it comes to apocalypse and comet panic.
Oh, like specifically?
Yeah, in many articles, they only talk about black people buying comet pills. There was apparently a voodoo doctor in Haiti. Or it says that black people are showing signs of comet panic and they don't want to leave their houses and they just stay home and pray and they miss work. It's very much a, oh my God, look at these uneducated, superstitious people who don't understand science thing. And that's of course nonsense because all kinds of people all over the world were kind of scared and panicky.
How bizarre. What a strange thing to be. Ugh.
Everyone is panicking, but then we're othering black people in a way.
Yeah. Like you go out of your way.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Then there was a guy in France who allegedly started selling bottled comet air so you could, quote, attune your body to the celestial transformation, end quote. Some folks held comet parties with themed cocktails and comet-shaped cakes. Some organized balloon parties to see the comet from as close as possible, which I find cool. Others sat in churchyards all night, just waiting and praying and chanting. Then there were reports of people pre-scheduling their funerals because nothing says I'm a rational human being like ordering a coffin just in case the sky gets gassy.
I just love the whole idea of this because I love a theme. And I really feel like they rose to the occasion here. I also like the fact that people were pre-scheduling funerals, and it reminds me of, is it a true story or an urban legend, the story of the man who went to his atheist neighbor and asked them to please take care of his cat because he believed that the rapture was coming and that the atheists would be left behind. But he really liked his neighbor, even though he was an atheist. So he wanted him to take care of the cat, which would also not be getting raptured. I don't know why that came back to me with this, but none of it's rational.
Anyway, then the big day came. 18th of May, 1910. Earth passed directly through the comet's tail and absolutely nothing happened. The sky looked cool. Some people saw streaks of light, and that was about it. The planet stayed exactly where it was. Everyone exhaled, sheepishly removed their gas masks, and quietly threw away their comet pills. The most dramatic side effects of Halley's Comet was probably the dent in everyone's dignity, at least a little bit, and maybe the bank accounts of those who'd invested in comet-proof umbrella startups. My favorite article that I found was printed on Thursday, so the next day, 19th of May 1910, in the Daily Gate City, Keokuk.
Yeah.
Keokuk. Please correct me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
I think it's Keokuk. Keokuk. I'm not sure.
Iowa. And this was printed on page 2. And it's just a few short excerpts because the whole article is a bit long. Maybe we'll read it for Patreon. Anyway, it's titled, City of Keokuk Entirely Destroyed by the Comet. Total destruction on the night of May 18th, 1910, when the comet gas wiped everything completely out of existence. Became an ash heap in a few moments. City leveled when annihilation came without warning, and the whole town became one exploding, blazing torch. Quote, what might have happened? Wednesday night, May 18th, 1910. Between the hours of 10 and 10:30, the city of Keokuk was entirely destroyed by the comet. Not one stone was left standing upon the other, not one life was spared, not one atom of the city remained. The destruction was complete, horrible. It was annihilation. While there had been some alarm among the timid people over the prospects of harm coming from the great comet, the greater majority of the citizens felt no fears, and the sudden onslaught came without warning. It was like the explosion of a hidden mine in the harbor which blows up the ship while the sailors are asleep. It was like the snuffing of a candle, the blowing out of a lamp, the extinguishing of a torch. A puff, and all was over. And then it goes into details how everything was destroyed. And then it says, what really did happen? The above is what Keokuk escaped last night by the comet gas not arriving. But what really did happen last night? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to smell. If there was any comet gas in the air, nobody noticed it. Many people were on the lookout from early in the evening until late at night, but nothing unusual was noticed. Shortly after sunset, there were some pink streaks of clouds in the west, but similar ones had been seen before. When dusk fell and the sun was gone and the moon was shining, there was a starry sky but no sign of the comet or its deadly gas. At midnight, there was nothing. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when the sky was partly cloudy, there was nothing to be seen. The northern lights did not appear and the comet's tail had been proven to be harmless. Many Keokuk people feel more relieved today than they did yesterday. There was really some fear among the people, for scientists were divided as to what was to result last night when the Earth whirled through the comet's tail. May 18 it passed, the world has not come to an end. We are safe now for the next 75 years. Then, our children and grandchildren must go through the comet's tail again. They need have no fear. The comet is now in the western sky. It was too near the sun last evening to be visible. In a couple of nights it can be seen and will hang in the western sky for several days. Do not fear it. It will do no harm. End quote.
That was a ride, that article.
I loved it. It's so good. So once again, we return to one of humanity's most reliable traditions, seeing something mildly unusual in the sky and assuming we're all going to die.
And I mean, honestly, if you're going to panic, at least do it with comet-themed pastries, right? It's called class.
Absolutely.
Make it classy. Yeah. Fun fact, the comet panic wasn't the only apocalypse people were bracing for in the 1910s. Just a few years later, in 1914, another doomsday date loomed large. This one courtesy of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, the religion itself started back in the 1870s. Originally known as the Bible Student Movement, it was founded by Charles Taze Russell. From the very beginning, 1914 was the year. Based on some deeply involved biblical math and prophetic interpretation of the book of Daniel, they believed that Christ would return to earth in 1914 and begin his heavenly reign. But that wasn't all. It would also mark the beginning of the end for all earthly governments. Basically, Christ shows up, kingdoms fall, paradise begins. In the lead up to 1914, followers spread the word door to door because some things never change, warning people of a coming bloody end to all kingdoms on earth. And then 1914 arrived, and nothing happened. No angels, no trumpets, no collapse of world governments. The world, stubbornly, as always, kept turning. However, just over halfway through the year, on June 28th, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, which, as we all know, kicked off World War I. So, depending on how generous you're feeling, you could say that something catastrophic did happen, just not quite the brand of divine intervention people were expecting. After the date passed, the movement didn't fold. Instead, the interpretation shifted. Jehovah's Witnesses later explained that Christ did begin ruling from heaven in 1914, but it was an invisible reign.
Of course it was.
Yeah. The physical changes would roll out later, like a soft launch. And this kind of reinterpretation has become a bit of tradition. When later dates came and went, 1925, 1975, they were similarly reframed. But 1914 remains foundational to Jehovah's Witness theology, even today. So, yes, Halley's Comet didn't poison the air in 1910, and Christ did not show up with a sword in 1914, but humanity still managed to stumble into one of the most devastating wars in history anyhow. Somehow we're still here, and the earth still keeps turning. Now let's talk about one of the most recent doomsday scares in modern history, Y2K. For those of you who are too young to remember or lucky enough to have repressed it, Y2K stands for Year 2000. And in the late 90s, it was everywhere.
Everywhere.
It was bananas. This was a big couple years for Gen X. I feel like millennials might be a little too young.
Yeah.
Between Y2K, then followed by 9/11, and then it's just so much snowballing. So, yeah, in the late 90s, you couldn't get away from Y2K. It was everywhere. And the basic idea was that when the clock struck midnight on January 1st, 2000, or 1999, 2000, that New Year's Eve, right? The worry was that computers all over the world would go haywire. It came down to how early computer systems handled dates. Back in the old times, in the 1900s, specifically the 1960s and 70s, computer memory was expensive and limited. So to save space, many systems stored years using just 2 digits. Like instead of 1985, it was just 85. And that was fine until you hit the year 2000.
I have a feeling that was kind of, let's make this future people's problem.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I think so. I just don't know that it ever occurred to anybody until, And so the fear was that instead of switching from 1999 to 2000, the fear was that the computers might reset back to 1900 instead. Like, I always imagined it as one of those, oh my goodness, now I'm really dating myself. One of those alarm clocks with the wheels that spin to change the time. Do you know what I mean?
I got you, babe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah. So what happens if it thinks it's 1900, then, oh no. And it might not seem like such a big deal until you remember that dates drive everything. Financial systems calculate interest and maturity dates. Power plants use date-stamped safety protocols. Even hospital equipment and airport scheduling systems rely on accurate dates. And if they thought they were suddenly living in the year 1900, well, no one was really sure what would happen. I mean, best case scenario, a few weird receipts. Worst case, nuclear war. And of course, according to doomsayers, we could expect planes falling from the sky, banks erasing all of your money, exploding microwaves, and nuclear power plants just to casually melt down. It was a techno-apocalypse straight out of a 1990s thriller. And governments took it seriously, very seriously. In the US, a special Y2K council was formed. In the UK, they called it the Millennium Bug, which somehow makes it sound like it was wearing like a little top hat or, I don't know.
Fancy.
Millennium Bug. Leave it to the Brits to make it sound fancy. And the UN even issued Y2K guidelines. Across the world, banks, airlines, energy companies, and utilities began poring over millions of lines of code in a race against the clock. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is accurate, in total, it was estimated that over $300 billion was spent worldwide in order to prepare for Y2K. Most of it went into replacing or patching legacy systems written by people who'd long since retired. Somewhere, someone probably had to bribe a former Cold War programmer out of his garden to explain what a line of code from 1971 was supposed to do. I don't know. It all
people
seems...
just sitting under the apple tree, enjoying retirement.
What did you mean by this? But wait, there's more. There were actual survival guides published, complete with food storage tips, generator recommendations, and advice on how to become more self-reliant if, say, Western civilization were to crumble overnight. People learned how to make sourdough and install solar panels and manually pump water, just in case society collapsed because a spreadsheet didn't update properly. There were people who withdrew all of their cash from banks because if the systems failed, your money might disappear. Other people started buying gold, others bought ammo, a very few committed individuals built bunkers, just in case your blender was to turn against you at midnight, Gremlin style. Now, if you thought Y2K panic was all spreadsheets and survivalist hoarding, oh no. There was also a very solid dose of end times prophecy, because of course there was. Several religious groups were absolutely convinced that Y2K would be the trigger for the second coming of Christ, the rapture, the end of days, or in some cases, all of the above in alphabetical order. One of the more infamous groups was called the Concerned Christians, a US-based doomsday sect that believed in the year 2000 would usher in the apocalypse, starting naturally in Jerusalem.
Concerned Christians, that doesn't sound alarming. It sounds like there's this slight problem and we really have some tiny thoughts about it. Like, I'm a little bit concerned about people not picking up after their dogs.
Right. If extreme sects and cults just called themselves what they actually were, no one would ever join them. So these folks were so committed to the idea that several members moved to Israel in the late 90s, and they were eventually deported by the Israeli authorities in 1999 for planning to instigate violence at holy sites in order to trigger the return of Jesus. So,
Jesus.
Yeah, that's awful. I'm glad that whole thing was stopped. And then there were well-known fundamentalist Christian leaders who didn't go that far, but still framed Y2K as divine punishment, a chance for God to humble the proud, break the internet, maybe do a little smiting, while he's here, they're here. Some said the glitch might be God's way of reminding us we rely too much on machines and not enough on him, which is fine, but I still need my phone. Others thought the collapse of technology would open the door to the Antichrist because obviously if the banks can't find your checking account, Satan wins. And he's probably got that money. Sorry. Can you tell that we've been watching The Righteous Gemstones lately? It's and then there was New Year's Eve 1999. People around the world were watching the ball drop in Times Square and thinking, all right, this is it. And then nothing happened.
I don't think that people around the world are watching the Times Square ball drop, to be honest.
No.
Because there's a time difference and also we don't care. We have our own things.
We watch yours too. If you're just hanging out and chilling and you've got that news channel on for the day, you'll watch it around the world as it goes around the world. Okay. So they'll show us Australia, and then they'll show, England, France. They'll show us all the major world
we see Australia.
capitals.
We see the ones ahead of us. But then when yours drop, you're already
in bed.
asleep.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we do watch the ones all over the world here. But obviously, I'm only talking about Americans, Johanna. I remember I was actually at a party with my then boyfriend at the time, Tom, who, oh my goodness, it was so much fun. He went down to the basement and as soon as the clock struck midnight, just to mess with everybody, he pulled the switch so all the power in the house went out. And there was a lot of people freaking out briefly, which was quite funny. So shout out to Tom, who has, the most beautiful family. He's the first person who suggested I could make money with my speaking voice. And because of him, I was the voice of a range of GE appliances in the early 2000s. So if my voices ever sound familiar, that might be why. That's another story for a different time. But how was your 2000?
I honestly really don't remember. I only remember being told to unplug every device before New Year's just to be safe. And I don't have any idea what that could have helped. And I guess it was basically to prevent the machines from rising up against us.
Oh. You were not flying yet then?
No. I started in 2001.
Yeah, the rise against the machines. Oh, that's a good year to start. God, we have great timing, you and I, don't we? Fuck me. Yeah, the rising of the machines, not gonna lie, quick sidebar, not something I ever gave much credence to until recently. Recently, there have been some advances that just kind of make me uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
We should do a Patreon
I'm always very friendly to
this.
My phone, just in case.
Just in case. I will also legitimately, I don't know if anyone else does this, let me think of what I want to see so that I'm not saying something that's going to trigger everybody's search engine. But if I start talking about taking a trip to Austria, visiting Austria in the spring, visiting Austria in the summer, visiting Austria in the fall, if I say anything like that, now watch, everyone's phone's going to be like, hey, were you looking for a flight to Austria? Sometimes it's helpful. Tell me about that ad I saw for those, whatever. And it'll work. It'll go back into your ad feed. But it's also terrifying.
Did you realize on Facebook now, under posts with AI art, for a while, all I saw was, not in our group is great, but on my wall, I saw AI photos of children in Africa building airplanes from plastic bottles and stuff like that, and cars. And then people under it in the comments were all like, this is amazing, you're so talented, praise Jesus. And then I realized it's just bots.
It's
talking
bots
to each other under a photo made by AI. So it's just bots talking to each other. So how long is it going to take until they don't need us anymore?
That's the thing. That's the scary thing, right? It's all bots. It's so shocking. I had no idea how many people on the internet were just bots.
Yeah.
Back to Y2K. There were some glitches, yeah. A U.S. spy satellite briefly stopped transmitting data. A couple of cash registers printed the wrong date. Some websites listed birthdays as January 1st, 1900. But that was it. Just a couple of things people pointed out as a problem that got fixed pretty fast. No chaos, no planes falling out of the sky. Just a regular New Year's Day, slightly more embarrassing than usual for anyone who had hoarded 20 gallons of powdered milk. Now, here's the thing. Y2K didn't end up being a joke because it was overblown. It ended up being a joke because it worked. All the panic and prep paid off. The engineers, programmers, and IT teams around the world had done their jobs quietly, carefully, and without a lot of drama. They fixed the bug before the world noticed that it could break. But of course, instead of thanking them, people were like, well, that was a waste of time. It's always how the way it goes, right?
Yeah. So ungrateful.
Y2K lives on as one of history's biggest neverminds. But it probably is also a great reminder that sometimes preventing disaster looked like nothing happened because all the work happened behind the scenes. I always think about that with not necessarily the Secret Service. That's the first agency that comes to mind. But every so often, you will hear about things that were stopped before they could happen. Or I'll be talking to my brother, who's a police officer, one of my friends, and it's like, oh, we managed to stop this thing. And that might not make the news. You might only hear about the things that get through. But there are so many people working really hard to try to make sure that you don't ever have to worry about it, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we had a near global freakout over 2 digits, it's kind of beautiful, right? It was like the last analog panic before the digital world truly took over. As apocalypses go, it was at least low on casualties and high on canned goods.
Yeah, and to think that only 12 short years after Y2K, we'd all be holding our collective breath again, and this time not because of some super high-tech issues, but because of a calendar that was over 5,000 years old.
Yes.
I'm talking about the Mayan calendar panic of 2012. Brilliant Mesoamerican civilization, the Mayas, created incredibly advanced astronomical systems, architecture, math, and yes, calendars. And one of those was the long count calendar, which tracks cosmic cycles in chunks of about 5,125 years. The current cycle, it was set to end on December 21st, 2012. That's it, end of the cycle. Kind of new calendar page. But naturally, modern humans took one look at that and said, obviously the Earth is going to vaporize by a rogue planet, or possibly the sun exploding, or maybe both, and we should absolutely panic. Books were written, documentaries were made. Wasn't there some talk about a planet X or Nibiru or Nibiru, I don't remember how it was called, hitting the Earth?
Yeah.
Conveniently invisible to astronomers because, of course, some thought, I remember that, the magnetic poles would flip.
Yes, I remember that too. The magnetic poles were going to flip and tilt us off our axis, right?
Yes. Others believed that there'd be a sudden spike in solar flares or that Chean would accidentally rip a hole in the space-time continuum, although I'm not convinced that that didn't happen because something happened with our reality. Something shifted lately. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Not really. Maybe.
Not really. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Hollywood, never want to miss a mass hysteria opportunity, gave us the film 2012, which featured tidal waves swallowing the Himalayas and John Cusack outrunning tectonic plates in a limousine, I think.
Oh my God. I love that movie so much. My boyfriend, John Cusack, is in it. Terrible disaster movies are my favorite. I almost brought it up earlier because that's also the natural disaster movie with all the arcs, right? The arky. Yeah. Can we do a thing where we all watch it together? I don't know if that's possible, but that would be so much fun.
Yeah.
A cinema macabre movie night where we just watch a movie together. It's so good.
And again, people took it seriously and some built again bunkers. Others emptied their savings to travel to Mayan temple sites. I remember Chichen Itza was packed, I think.
Oh, I bet.
They believed that spiritually protected. And of course, there were survival kits and anti-apocalypse crystals and I don't know, probably you could find some end of the world themed tea blends on Etsy back when Etsy was really cool. Meanwhile, actual Mayan scholars and descendants were very calmly explaining that no, this was not a prophecy of doom. It was simply the end of a cycle. Like when your calendar ends on December 31st and you buy a new Grumpy Kitten calendar, and that you don't assume that means time itself will cease to exist.
Can you imagine living with that level of panic all the time?
Every December.
Yeah.
And then the day came, 21st of December. People meditated, they held hands, they probably went others stocked up on snacks. The sun rose, the sun set. Not a single volcano exploded as far as I know. Once again, the apocalypse was cancelled. And the Mayans weren't wrong. We just completely misread the invitation of what's going to happen.
I heard a lot about this one because Paul and I were married in 2012. And a lot of people kept saying, like, oh, well, the world's going to end, so you might as well. That was a big, it was a big deal at the time. Like you said, there was so much going on. And I remember we specifically played It's the End of the World as We Know It during our reception because of all the chatter about the world ending. So after all these false alarms from planetary alignments and prophets to comet pills, failed raptures, and ancient stone calendars that just ran out of space, you might be wondering, how many times has the end of the world actually been predicted?
Oh, I looked that up. Just a modest 1,000 or so that we know of. I think historians estimate that over 1,500 specific doomsday dates have been proclaimed since, well, basically forever.
And like 1,000 of them are Nostradamus, right? And then the other 500 are just random.
Religious leaders, a few by people who really should have less access to publishing tools, I think, especially now with the internet and social media. I think we're going to see a rise in that number.
Oh, yeah. And what do they all have in common, Johanna?
They were wrong.
Every single one.
Yeah, and yet somehow we still fall for it. Every few years, someone updates the apocalypse, slaps a fresh date on it, and people start panic buying lentils and backup generators and toilet paper all over again, and you think people might stop buying into the whole "the end is nigh" thing. But no, we just keep on scheduling the apocalypse like it's a dentist appointment.
So you just mentioned stocking up on lentils. Is that a popular thing to stock up on where you live?
Lentils are great because they keep for a really long time, and they're cheap, and they are very nutritious.
Ah, see?
Dried
where
lentils,
we live,
awesome.
I feel like all we ever get prepped for is French toast alerts here, which is just, used to always just be bread, eggs, and milk. It would be what was gone from all the stores. And then during COVID, toilet paper also became.
Yeah, here also.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get, how do you call that in, what do you make sourdough with?
Like the sourdough starter?
No, what's it called?
Flour?
No, the thing that rises the dough.
Yeast.
Thank you. That was the word I was missing. Yeah. That was gone, and you couldn't get yeast for almost a year.
Oh, because everybody was learning how to bake bread?
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone is sitting on a huge surplus of yeast because it equaled out before they could offload it. But yeah, fun fact, in 2012, so the year of the Mayan Doomsday calendar, global polls across 20 countries found that 14% of people believed the world would end in their lifetime. In the US and Turkey, that number was as high as 22%. In the UK, a 2015 study found 23% of the general public believed the apocalypse was likely in their lifetime. These are modern polls, not from the Dark Ages, but from the days of Netflix.
And the predictions themselves, they are still a mix of old and new. So, some people think it will be a nuclear war that will take us out. Others are more into the AI is taking over and it's going to kill us all, climate collapse, or, good old-fashioned wrath of God or gods, whatever you believe in.
And then you've got a solid 3% of people in the UK and the US who are absolutely sure it will be zombies or aliens, which honestly feels a little bit optimistic at this time. But why are we like this? Well, psychologists say it comes down to a couple of things. For one, boiling the world's chaos down to a single predictable disaster is comforting in a strange way. It gives people a sense of control, even if it's false. Plus, we all kind of like being scared, especially when it's abstract and exciting and doesn't revolve any actual responsibilities on your part. This is especially important to remember when you watch the news.
And then there's also this weird romanticism around the end of the world. Like there's movies and books and shows, and they show the apocalypse is kind of cozy when you're not running for your life.
Right.
It's quiet. It's simple. Like you'd finally have time to finish a book or learn to bake sourdough bread between fighting off zombie mutants and aliens and
all
running from tectonic plates crushing you. Yeah.
Ugh. And then there's the influence of religion. For thousands of years, people have been raised with the idea that this world isn't permanent, that something massive and divine is going to come along and just shake everything up. And that mindset hasn't gone away, it's just been repackaged. From the Last Judgment to AI uprisings, it's still the same pattern. Humanity's obsession with starting over by ending everything. So yeah, we're not going to stop predicting the end of the world anytime soon. And sure, it might actually happen one day. But if it does, statistically speaking, it won't be on schedule.
Yeah, and I'd say until then, we'll keep checking the sky, scanning for signs, and building a podcast bunker stocked with sarcasm and books and chocolate. It needs to have chocolate and dogs. See, that's always my big worries and honestly recurring nightmares, surviving the zombie apocalypse with the dogs. Jem would be so hard to manage, I know it.
No, I don't even want to think about trying to cope with both Opus and Orlamine. So you're kind of a mix of stuff. Are you a prepper or do you want to be at ground zero?
It really depends. Anything nuclear taking us out, ground zero, please.
Yeah.
Zombies or other stuff, I would try to survive for as long as possible. Like, I'd call myself a soft prepper. Like, I always have enough food and water and meds and dog food and dog meds at home to get us through like 2 to 4 weeks. For something like a short-time problem, like a blackout, that's at the moment the big thing. Like, what if the blackout is happening? And, we have candles at home and this kind of... It's also because of my husband's job, he's like, always be a little bit prepared, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all reasonable, good, normal levels of preparedness.
Yeah, that's also why I like our wood-firing stove, because then I know if there's, no electricity at least, and it's winter, we're not going to freeze.
You'll be able to stay
and
warm.
That's all nice, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really important.
How about you?
My family's split. I think I personally would rather, as you said, go to ground zero. And it's probably easier for us to say that because we don't have kids, to say nah, let's just go. But I think for us, if say a tsunami was coming, we wouldn't be going away from the ocean and north into the mountains. We would be heading right for our little cottage so that we would see the view and be gone as fast as possible. I think that would be my choice. I don't want to survive anything. I don't want to have to overcome an apocalypse. I'm good. I've survived enough. I've had a good run. I just want to see the big wave. So I'm cool. It's all good.
And let's be fair, if the world ever does end, someone somewhere will absolutely say, see, I told you. And then probably add, I was only off by 37 years.
And then, right then, that's when they get sucked to the other side. They thought they were in the clear, but then they were like, I told you so. Nope. Gone. Oh, almost made it. Ooh.
You have something good after all this?
Shout out to Dr. Brandt, one of my doctors, who I just found out actually occasionally listens. She's amazing. I appreciate her very much. Also, disaster movies. I'm sure I've said this before, I love terrible disaster movies. I really do. Day After Tomorrow, 2012, twisters, you name it. Any kind of horrible disaster movie. What was the one? Oh, San Andreas. Yeah, that was really bad in a great way. Terrible. I love them. They'll keep coming out with them because people like me I love a good, bad disaster movie. You guys know what I'm talking about. How about you?
How about me? What's my something good? You know what's my something good? After my little rant last week about fictional characters dying and me being upset about it, my something good is our community, because we got so many nice comments and messages of people who were like, they totally understand me. Some even guessed what I was talking about without spoiling it for others. But it was so cute. I felt validated, and that was really nice. Like, I didn't feel kind of over dramatic and crazy.
No,
so thank you for taking me serious.
I know. Well, you telling me that made me not want to watch it, because I'm like, I don't want to cry that hard. I don't want to be that devastated. No, thank you. Before we go, if you made it all the way to the end of this Doomsday parade, first of all, thank you. You survived yet another apocalypse with us. And if you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, please know that there are just a couple of very easy, free ways you can support the show. Leaving a quick rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, YouTube, honestly helps more than you think. It tells the algorithm gods, yeah, this podcast is worth recommending to strangers.
And if you'd like to help us keep the lights on, as we'd say, and by lights we mean research rabbit holes, sound editing software, newspaper archive subscriptions, you name it, you can join our Patreon. We've got bonus content, we've got early access, we've got Cinema Macabre and other goodies over there. Our recaps of Welcome to Chippendales are coming to an end, and we are currently deciding on what we should watch next.
So good. We also now offer Spotify and YouTube channel subscriptions, if that's more your style. Similar perks, different platforms. Early access to our episodes, for example, are available on all of those different platforms. You can also help simply by sharing the show with a friend or posting about us on social media. Like, anytime you see someone somewhere saying, hey, I need a recommendation for a podcast, mention us. It's that kind of word of mouth that's the reason that we are still here. We are also on Facebook, where we have a lovely, weird, supportive little community. Just search for Fresh Hell Podcast. You'll also find us on Instagram and TikTok.
Not our favorite platform, I'd say.
I don't understand how to use it. I'm too old for all of this. We need an assistant, but we don't have enough money to do that. We need more patrons so that we can hire an assistant to post the socials.
It's the cat's biting its own tail, I think, here.
That's right.
Anyway, if you have case suggestions, a weird, hometown mystery, or maybe a doomsday story of your own, tell us, how did you spend Y2K? We're really interested. We'd love to hear from you.
I would love to hear how everybody spent Y2K. I bet we have some good Y2K stories.
Email us at freshhellpodcast@gmail.com or visit our website at freshhellpodcast.com. If you're old school like we are, and if you love real mail, our P.O. box address is listed on the website as well. Tell your pets we said hi. Hug them, cuddle them, kiss them, snuggle them, brush them, check them for ticks. Oh my God, all the ticks.
Ugh.
Be kind to them. Be kind to your fellow human being, your fellow human doomsday preppers.
That's right.
And most importantly, be kind to yourself, because the end could be very nigh.
It could. And you're great. You're a great person, and we're really glad that you're around and that you're listening to this. And just remember, I saw this thing the other day and I was like, oh, that's so true. No matter how old you are, you haven't met everyone who's going to love you yet. Isn't that great? All right, folks, we'll see you next week. And in the meantime, if you're going through hell,
keep going towards the tidal wave. I don't know.
Walk directly toward, stare into the sun while you walk toward the wave.